So with me today on MEIJI Masters podcast, we have the privilege of having Des Powell. Des, you've got an incredible military background, and you spent 8 years in the Paras, 20 years in the 22nd Special Air Service Regiment, and very recently you wrote a best-selling book, which is a Times best-selling book called Bravo 30, which tells the story of the mission that you did over 20 years ago in the Gulf War. So there's a lot to cover on our discussion today. But I'd like to start off by asking you this. How did you transition from the parachute regiment, which is already regarded as an elite regiment within itself, into arguably the most elite regiment in the world as far as Special Forces is concerned, which is the 22nd SAS? What made you want to go from one elite unit almost to another?
Yeah, I think when I decided to go SAS, I think what it is, it's a mind shift, okay, that changes. And I'd done 8 years in the parachute regiment, but I found that I wanted to have my career go in a more serious direction, if you like.
Right.
And people in the military, when they decide to go SAS, you are telling everybody that I'm taking a serious route. I'm going to change my career, and generally you're talking about elongating your military career.
Right.
I've done 8 years, and all of a sudden I decided, right, I want to go to another level, and the only other level you can go to is SAS. And I think the Paris prepares you to go to the SAS. Now, we have many regiments in the armed forces. We've got the guards, we've got the signals, engineers. I was in the Paris. We have a great British Armed Forces. I can only speak for the Paris, and I felt that the Paris prepared me for the SAS. It gave me more exposure. I think
Sorry, may I ask you, when you say prepare you, do you mean in a physical sense, or do you mean in a kind of mental sense? Did it prepare you, or a combination of both?
A combination of both. For a start, the lifestyle in the Paris, it's very rough, tough. And that means physically, but also mentally as well. So when I decided to go Special Forces SAS, I felt in my case that Paris prepared me to go to the SAS. The Paris is like a sister regiment, if you like, to the SAS. Okay. We've already got that airborne brotherhood. We already jump out in aeroplanes. But also, there is more Paras in the SAS than any other regiment. And I think it's because of what I've just said. It's our sister regiment. We already airborne brotherhood, and we have more exposure to the regiment, if you like, from the actual parachute regiment. So for me, it was another step, a preparation. It prepared me, it got me ready for the life that was going to come, which was my life in the Special Forces.
Special Forces. So before we come on to talk about Bravo 30, which is an extraordinary book, and it's an extraordinary tale of what happened.
Thanks.
But before we come on to talk about that, can you just explain, I mean, how does it work preparing for an elite regiment, i.e. the SAS, when you're already on your day-to-day, already in the Paris? I mean, how do you find the time to prepare? What was it that you were doing to help you prepare for selection? How long did that take?
I think what it is, answering your question, is that physically, I was probably ready to go up to the SAS. I had 8 years in the parachute regiment, but mentally, I don't think I was ready. It took me 8 years, if you like, to get mentally prepared. And I think what you do, it's the fear aspect in it. There's two types of fear in it. The fear of, am I good enough? Or the fear of, what if I fail? Right. Well, guess what? It's the same fears, isn't it? And you won't know until you actually go and do the actual selection process itself to find out, am I good enough? And if I fail, well, then that's the way it is. But it's about a desire,
right?
Okay, because the regiment has this mystique type view on it. Nobody knows anything about it, and it was same when I was in the Paris. So it was a desire to go there, and my desire was burning. It was keeping me awake at night. That was a place I wanted to go. And in actual fact, when I went up there, I burnt bridges. I told everyone that I'd grown out of Para-Reg, and if I don't make it in the SAS, I was going to get out into Civil Stream. So I was serious about it.
So really, for you, it was almost, if I don't get in there, I'm out, finito, gone.
Agreed. And I think that's how serious you've got to get in this. You can't just go up there and say, do you know something, I'm going to give it a go. No, you go up there, remember it's volunteer, nobody forces you to go.
Right.
You know, and so it's like anything else. you've got to prepare for the task which is coming up. And the SAS, it should be no surprise, it's going to be hard. Okay, it's what it says on the can. You know it's going to be stressful. So there's no surprise there. So it's like any task that comes up, Stefano, you've got to prepare for it.
Right.
You know, so mentally I prepared. I got my weapon training up to skills, my map reading, my fitness. I did everything I possibly could before I actually went up and went on selection. We call it the selection process. We don't call it the SAS test. We call it selection.
And can you just give a flavour? How many guys went on your selection when you did it?
Yeah, the selection itself, there's two. There's one in winter, there's one in summer.
Can you choose, or do they just tell you when you're going?
No, you can choose. You
can choose
right. Anywhere you go. For example, some guys, are hot weather soldiers. Okay, some guys class themselves as cold weather. I went cold weather just mainly because I thought I may have more of a chance. There's less people go on the cold one than they do on the summer one,
Right.
And I tend to kind of do better in the colder weather. Don't get me wrong, I like the hot weather.
Right.
I chose the winter one, and there's generally around about 250. I think on mine it was about 265, 270 guys. By the end of 6 months is the selection process.
It's an incredibly long time.
A long time, yeah. And in my case, 270 guys approx. At the end, there was 6 of us.
6 of you out of 200. I can't do the maths, but that's I mean, they're just a few percent getting through.
Agreed. And the summer one, you might get something like twice as much as that. You might get 500 guys. So you might only get about 12 through. So it's all relative.
Right.
But yes, over 90% failure rate. And you can understand what I said at the beginning is that you talk yourself out of it. You're scared of, am I good enough to do this? And what if I fail? And it's that stops you from going, Stefano.
But is it really that? I mean, or is it a physical thing? Is it that guys just turn up and they haven't done the prep work? They're just not fit enough? Or would you say actually it's more of a psychological thing? They don't have the tenacity to carry on? I mean, what would you say is the main cause of failure?
Answering your question, when I was up there were guys fitter than me.
Fitter than you?
They were guys stronger than me. They were guys that were better soldiers than me. So there's got to be some luck involved in this. Or are we saying that there was more desire? I really wanted it. Okay.
Because you got through second time, didn't you?
Yes, I went up there the first time. I got injured. That's classed as a failure.
Right.
It doesn't matter how you fail, you fail. And I had to come back and do it all again.
So essentially, even if you twist your ankle,
Correct.
You can't have a couple of days off and rejoin.
No. And Guy said to me, Des, was it easy the first time or the second time? I said, definitely the second time because you know what's coming.
Right. But second time you got through.
Yes.
What's the feeling like, Des? I mean, this is something experienced by 0.0001% of guys who pass special forces selection. What's that feeling like when you get, I don't know how it works, but presumably you get handed that beige beret, which is iconic. What's that feeling like when you're given that? I mean, how does that feel? Can you?
Yes, there's. I remember the 6 of us got through, and I remember there was one of my friends called Taff. We were quite close together.
Right.
And I remember we come to the 6 months. We just finished the last phase, which is the escaping evasion, and there's a phase, the interrogator as well.
Right.
I remember that day that we come off and we've been interrogated and we've been on the run for a couple of weeks, people were chasing us and dogs were chasing us, and then you go in the pen and you get interrogated for a couple of days or so. Right. And I remember saying to him, I goes, wow, I wonder what we got through, didn't we? He goes, yeah, we did. I goes, wondering what the coming years are going to bring. And it's funny, me and him went to the same squadron.
Did you really?
Yeah, and over the years we talked to each other, and it's funny, spent approximately 20 years up here. And so did he, by the way. All those 6 guys had long careers.
In the SAS?
Yeah, everyone that goes up there, they go up there with the intention of having long careers. When you get up there, you don't want to leave. You put in so much hard work.
Wow.
So everyone has long careers. And by the way, the regiment invests in you.
Right.
In time, money, preparation of what's going to come. But I remember saying, wow, I wonder what the coming years are going to bring. And over the years, we used to say, wow, this gets better, doesn't it?
So would you say, I mean, having got through selection, which is already extraordinary, would you say that the subsequent 20 years, did it exceed your expectations or just meet your expectations of what you were expecting?
Oh, it's far, far better.
It far exceeded it.
As you can imagine, Stefano, is that after that 6 months, you go to your squadron.
Right.
Okay.
That's your new home.
Yeah, that's
your new family.
That's your new home. Now,
right. Okay.
Just to give you some sort of idea of what it's like. So I go to that squadron, and now I'm with guys that have climbed Everest.
Right.
I've climbed the ice mountain in the world. And then I've got guys that have rowed parts of the Atlantic.
Right.
I've got guys that have done free-fall records, jumping out on airplanes. I've got guys that race motorbikes and cars. You know, and you've got guys that have been on language courses for 18 months. I've got a guy that had come back from Germany, and now he's an expedition leader because he's been working with the Germans out in Germany and Switzerland and all the mountains over there. So you are working now with guys at the top of their game. But what is good is that they want you to be the best as well. They want you to be the biggest, the fastest, the toughest, the ugliest, okay, that you can ever be. And everybody around you is raising your game. Nobody wants you to do less than the best.
So would you describe it as in that sense then, a real sort of team effort, in the sense that no one's jockeying around saying, I'm the best in this thing, you're the new guy, and putting you down, as it were. They really want you to succeed as a unit.
Yes, they do. And I remember going up there with a wrong mindset. You can imagine I've come from the paras, no disrespect.
So can you describe the difference between the mindsets then?
Yeah, in the paras, you're big, you're tough, you wear the maroon machine, chest out, you go for it, I'm the best. And there's nothing wrong with that. It works, and you do feel you're the best unit, the toughest unit. And bear in mind, the paras have a reputation going back over to the Second World War, don't they? But going up with that attitude of biggest and boldest and loudest and toughest doesn't always work with the SAS. And as I've said in my book, the story goes that I went up with that attitude and it didn't work for the first couple of years. And I'm thinking, I'm not doing too well here. A few times, hey, we don't like that attitude over here. Instead of now being loud, they want you to be, as they call it, the grey man.
Right.
Just be a little bit more mellow. Just be a bit more humble. Stop shouting and telling people what you're about and whatever. The regiment don't want any of that.
They don't.
No, they want you to be, if you like, a more professional attitude. Yes, they want you to be a soldier like anything else, but they want you to be the grey man. They want you to be more professional and to be able to handle all of what I've just talked about, all that largeness, all that big, all that being the best, all that let's go for it. But let's face it, that going into the S shouldn't surprise you, because it's what it says on the can. You're going to the SAS, nothing should surprise you up there. You're going to be more stressed. It's going to be more hard work. It's going to be a harder life. They want the best for you, and you're going to be put in the most difficult situations.
But I guess from what you're saying, really, you need to display, almost paradoxically, more humility when you're in there.
Yes, and you can appreciate it. Is that you go there, you don't know how to play, because nobody like says, this is a set of rules.
Right.
This is what we
This is the code of conduct.
Yeah, there's nobody like sits you down. They're very good at it. They kind of let you find your way. And if you do something wrong, you go, get back in, to the left, to the right.
So someone does actually. There is someone who's...
somebody that'll have a word with you.
They'll have a quiet word in the ear.
And at the beginning, I had a few words in my ear, which stories you
talk about.
Yeah. And it's basically that. And you're not expected to know, are you? You've got to get the experience. And you can imagine that 6 months, and that's quite a shock, And all of a sudden, now you go to the squadron. And
do you choose the squadron, or do they choose you?
What they do, they'll say, what squadron would you like to go to? Because you may have a friend, your father may have been in there, you may have had family. So by tradition in the military, they try to do that. If your family was in this particular regiment, and they do it broad brush, by the way, in the military. If my father was in the Pararage, they tried to write Pararage, and he was in this battalion, etc.
So you chose...
I chose B Squadron.
B Squadron, which is the airborne.
And then they ask you what troop. And just to explain for our listeners, is that each squadron has air troop, boat troop, mobility, and mountain.
Each troop?
In each squadron.
Each squadron.
Yeah.
And there are 4 squadrons?
Yes, and you have 4 troops in each of the 4
okay.
squadrons. So like mountain troop is all to do with mountain and climbing.
Okay.
And ice climbing, glaciers, all of that. You got boat troop, and that is diving, scuba diving, submarines, boats.
Right.
Then you're talking mobility, all to deal with vehicles and bikes and rovers and jeeps going across, and we have a history to the Second World War, okay, of dealing with vehicles out in North Africa.
Yeah.
And then I was in air troop, and air troop specialised in high altitude free fall parachuting. That's jumping from aircraft 25,000 feet in the air, it's about 5 miles up, with oxygen, free falling for approximately 2 minutes, okay, and they are classed as your entry skills. That's as me, free falling in parachuting into a volatile area, okay, behind enemy lines and not being seen. So and you can have a choice of that, or if there isn't room at that particular time, they will try and fit you in within the year. And it happened to me. I wanted air troop. They said there's no vacancies in air troop at the moment. I'll go, okay, but mobility. So I went to mobility for 1 year and really enjoyed it. Good bunch of guys, and I learned a lot about vehicles and bikes. But then after a year, they said they got a vacancy in air troop, and then I carried on my career.
Okay, yeah. Can you tell the listeners how you developed this rather unique nickname, which was Kamikaze Des?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, it's nothing to do with drinking either.
No, not at all. No. What it is that I had 3 malfunctions all the time. I was, which is probably 3 too many. And it's when you are parachuting generally at night, and all of a sudden your chute comes out and it's not doing what it should be doing.
Right.
And in other words, it's not slowing you down. You're still screaming towards the earth. And there's a procedure called cutaway. And it's not literally you cut the chute away, but there's a handle on your harness, parachute harness, where you pull and it releases that bad chute.
Right.
And then you pull another handle and it releases your reserve chute. The reason you don't pull them together is that you don't want reserve wrapping round your bad chute. We call it a bag of washing above his head. And then you go into free fall again, and then you go on your reserve chute. And that's happened 3 times. And people said to me the obvious thing, Des, that's not very good. And what happens, okay, what if your reserve chute doesn't work? And I said, well, it's just not your day, and
it's as simple as that.
It's as simple as that. But I've never known that happen. And when you look at it, Stefano, is that, free fall parachutes is, even when, because there's a sport aspect side to it as well, when you can go Saturdays and Sundays.
But that's very different, isn't it?
Yes, it is. When you are doing the work free fall parachuting, as we say up in the regiment, that separates the men from the boys, and that's when you're earning your money, by the way.
Can you explain how big a difference it is versus just the sport?
Sport parachuting. By the way, all the troops, the mountain troop, the boat troop, mobility,
right.
It all has a sport. The ability guys like riding bikes and mountain, they go and climb mountains with boat, they like canoes and stuff like that. And in free fall, you've got that sport element where, on a Saturday afternoon, you might want to go and do some fun and jump out in an aircraft and just, enjoy it.
Right.
But when you're actually working, that's different. That's generally jumping at night, 25,000 feet.
I mean, that's extraordinary.
Yeah. On oxygen.
Yeah, that's extraordinary.
With all the equipment that you need for the task in hand.
Right.
You're free falling for 2 minutes, traveling at speeds 150, 180 mile an hour, depending on your body shape. And there's always a chance that you may bump into each other in the sky. Remember, there's other free fallers with you in the sky. And I remember on one particular task, we were in a cold country. It was 30 below and more. And you can imagine when you are coming down and you're screaming towards the ground at 150, 180 mile an hour, you get a wind chill, which will bring the temperature even lower. And then because your goggles are freezing up and your altimeters are freezing up, and because your oxygen is freezing up, and you're getting hypoxia and you can't breathe properly, it's an acquired taste.
Wow.
Okay, and it's not.
But you had 3 incidences. Thank God you survived them all without injury.
Yes, I did, and but that's where I got the nickname.
Kamikaze Des. Des, let's talk about the book now, Bravo 30, which is an extraordinary tale, and it's co-written with Damian Lewis, who's done an amazing job. And I think one of the things he captures so well, actually, is the banter between you guys when you're behind enemy lines and there's so much pressure on you. So the book is an incredible read. there's two or three questions I wanted to ask you. I mean, just to set the scene for maybe some of the younger listeners who maybe this is maybe they weren't even born when all this was kicking off. So we're going back to the second Gulf War.
Yes.
You weren't expected actually to be going at all. You didn't think you'd be participating. So can you pick up the story as to how you learned you were actually going in? Because it wasn't for the task that you originally thought of, was it?
That's right. The leader of Iraq at that time, Saddam Hussein, invaded Kuwait. You can't do that. You can't invade another country. So what happened is the rest of the world got involved. The regiment from the start had made it clear that they were getting involved in this conflict in a big way. We'd had already 3 squadrons that had been preparing for what was going to come. They knew that war was imminent. But what happened out of those 3 squadrons that had been preparing in the Middle East, one of them returned back to Hereford, and our squadron, B Squadron, we was on the anti-terrorist team at the moment, and we changed roles. And then they stayed in UK, and we went out to the Middle East. And it was, as you could see, we had a squadron coming back had been prepared for at least 3 months or so, and we were going out and we weren't prepared at all. But they were saying that we didn't need to be prepared because we was going out for a different task, and that task was BCRs, battle casualty replacements. And that was pure and simply the remaining 2 squadrons that was out in the Gulf, is that if anyone was injured or killed, we was then to replace them.
But that's not what happened, is it?
No.
So can you just tell the story? Because one of the things that struck me in the book, which I thought was pretty extraordinary, is that you were so poorly equipped because you had inadequate clothing, you had vehicles that really weren't fit for purpose, and there's a great anecdote that you tell when you're having to go across, which I thought was hilarious. You have to go across the Navy SEALs to actually kind of gently beg, borrow, and steal for some equipment, and they were very gracious because they kind of gave you everything you asked for. So can you just how did that come? How is it possible you guys don't have the right gear?
Yeah, I think what it is, we said earlier on, we've got 3 squadrons want to come back. We replaced them. 2 squadrons were going to start from the border of Saudi Arabia and just fight all the way up from border Saudi Arabia up to Iraq, up to Baghdad. And we were there as BCR, battle casualty deployments. But the first 2 squadrons had took all the equipment. We were like the poor cousins, if you like, and rightfully so. But our task was different, as you can see. It was probably an easier task, just to replace soldiers that had been injured or killed. But suddenly then a different task come about, and this is how the Bravo patrols come about. We then were supposed to go behind enemy lines, a couple of 100 miles behind enemy lines, and find these mobile scuds that were causing real problems, especially with Israel. But we had no equipment. And this particular story that you're talking about is that on the airfield out in Saudi Arabia, I could see in the distance we had a SEAL team, SEAL Team 6. And they were out there, and I thought, okay, no equipment, and me being a typical Yorkshireman, cap in hand, I'm quite good at persuading people, as you can see. I'm not too bad at talking once I get going into something. And I thought, let's get over there. And I went over to the SEAL. And the SEALs have a certain look. They've got all the equipment, they look the part.
So the films aren't exagerated, are they? They have all the gear, don't they?
No. And it's funny, I did a podcast with Jack Carr, who's, I had a chat with me and him, were laughing on a podcast. I go, you do have a certain look, don't you, Jack? He goes, yes, we do. And but a great bunch of guys, very professional. I work with them a lot. And arguably, Stefano, they saved the day. I went over and I sat down with them, and we kind of did a gingangooli, as I call it. We sat outside because we were sleeping outside on this airfield, waiting for the task that was coming up. The SEALs were there; they were sat there. They got tasks coming up, and we were sat just drinking tea and coffee and chocolate. And I said, right, guys, I'm going out on the ground possibly in the next few days. I need some equipment. What do you need? I says, I need rations, weapons, I need ammunition, and I need certain this and that. And he goes, what is it with your Brits? you come to a wall, you know, and you turn up with nothing, you know, and you're coming to us, capping out and asking for this much stuff. And of course, just like this, we're having a laugh, like, you know. And he goes, okay, buddy, leave it with me, you know. And about an hour later, he turns up, he had all these ration packs, he had ammunition, cold weather equipment, and the likes. And I thought, wow. And he says, there you go. And I said, by the way, you know, can we have got any more of this chocolate? I quite like this, like, you know, and he's looking at me, laughing at me, like, you know.
But Des, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say they quite possibly saved your not just yours, but yours and your squadron, your group's lives because of everything they gave you.
Yes, arguably, you know, they could have saved the day, and I don't mind saying that because, okay, people say, how does this happen? And yeah, there were blatant mistakes out there, you know. Didn't have right equipment, cold weather equipment, didn't have mapping, we didn't have proper clothing, we didn't have proper ammunition, certain weapon systems were left behind, even the Land Rovers that we had weren't battle ready, and okay, there were mistakes made, but there's other things that happen. We can't control the weather.
Sure.
Okay, although they did tell us it was going to be weather in like it is in spring, like it is in UK.
That's right.
It turned out to be the coldest weather they'd ever had on.
Because you experienced snow.
Yes, we did. Yeah. But they did leave quite a lot of stuff behind. Our mapping was, I think on my map, I think it said 1945. I think it said. I had a smock, like you said, smokes, camouflage. I think it had 1943 in mind.
Wow.
And, you know, and so, yes, and we didn't come with cold weather equipment. Okay, there's other reasons, is that conflict moves so fast, doesn't it, that you can't always get the equipment to marry up with you at the same time. I mean, from me leaving UK, I was behind enemy lines within inside probably 10 days or something.
That's extraordinary.
Like that. Yeah, it was fast. But yeah, there were things that shouldn't have happened. But do you know something, Stefano? When you get on the ground, and when we did get on the ground, and you realise that the intelligence is wrong, and you haven't got the right equipment,
that's right.
And then we found out the radios weren't working,
right,
and the mapping's not correct, and all of a sudden you go, this is not going too well. But you know, like all soldiers, you've been given a task to do. You can't whinge, you whine, a bellyache. You've got to get on with it.
Okay, so Bravo 30 is the extraordinary tale of what happens behind enemy lines. But just as a mild recap, Bravo 10 didn't deploy because they landed, and the sergeant major or the soldier in charge said, actually, we're not doing this. And he came under a considerable amount of flack for pulling his guys out, didn't he? But in retrospect, it was the right decision. So that is, would that be fair to say?
Yes, 100%. Is that, you know, people said to me, they go, well, how come some people went for, but your patrol went with vehicles? Well, then, when you get the intelligence and you look at the task in hand, it could be done on foot, but it could also be done with vehicles. But it's left down to the troops on the ground. That's where the expertise is, Stefano, you know, between the corporals, the sergeants, staff sergeants. And
you make that decision yourselves?
Yes.
Right.
You know, the task comes from above. This is a task that needs to be done, but we decide how it's going to go, what equipment needs to be taken, and what we do. And on Bravo 10 you're talking about is that when the helicopter went behind enemy lines and landed, they got off the aircraft and saw that, hang on, this is not what we were told. This is not the intelligence that we were told. But what they did, they had a look, they assessed the situation. They actually got back on the aircraft, had a chat with the pilot, and said, could you fly into another location? Because this is not what we've been told. This doesn't look right.
Right.
And that's what he did. You know, went to another place. Bear in mind, this is hundreds of miles behind enemy lines in Iraq. Now they fly to another place, and they have a look. They got off the aircraft. They had a look again, and realised, you know, bad intelligence. Hang on, this is not what we've been told again. But then they had to make a decision. And that decision was that they felt that the task could not be completed in a successful fashion, and they came back. And yes, there was considerable flack because of that, as you can imagine. In my opinion, I think they did the
right decision.
The right decision.
It was a very brave decision.
Yes, it was. Very brave.
Extremely brave.
Even though everyone in that patrol, it's an 8-man patrol,
right,
and everyone in that patrol has a say in it. It comes down to the commander himself in the end, and he collated on what you think, and he talk about it. But then he says, no, I don't think we can achieve the mission, and then he come back. I talk about that in the book. In my opinion, I think he saved that members of that patrol's lives.
And the story of Andy McNabb and Chris Ryan, the one that got away, the book that he wrote after his incredible, extraordinary trek across the desert.
Yeah.
But those guys decided to go on foot.
Yes.
And you actually spoke to Andy McNabb in the hangar and Chris Ryan because you were having a debate with them because you guys decided to take the Pinky and Dinky?
That's right, yeah.
I think the two vehicles, the Land Rovers, the short wheelbase and long wheelbase. And then those guys decided to have the equivalent of a house on their back.
Yes.
Because they were carrying like 80 kgs or 100 kgs.
Yes, yeah. And as you can appreciate, this is no criticism on anybody. This is just the way it is. You know, Bravo 1 and Bravo 2 decided to go out.
And that's fair enough. I mean,
that is fair enough. There's nothing wrong with that. They decided that they wanted to do it and they felt that they could achieve the task on foot. We decided to take a couple of Land Rovers. And what it is, yes, the story that you're talking about, me and Andy McNabb, you know, we were talking and you know, and Chris Ryan as well. And we were talking about, well, your guys are taking this amount of equipment and that's a lot of equipment and are you still able to fight with that much equipment on the body? What if you get compromised? And they were saying, well, yeah, that's a fair one, but you've got two vehicles there that do not look battle ready. You know, they look in a bit of a sorry state, which they were, and they wasn't battle ready, prepared. They didn't look much. They just looked like a couple of farmers' Land Rovers, if you like. We had a big one, which we call a Pinky. We had a smaller one called a Dinky, or I nicknamed it a Dinky.
Right.
And but we said, well, if you get compromised, you can't run, you can't go anywhere. At least if we have vehicles, we could put up a counter ourselves regarding fighting, or if we have to evacuate and come back to Saudi. So there was arguments on both sides. But as you can imagine, you're a soldier. You've been given a task to do a mission, okay? And we are SAS. And we are expected to get the job done. We have a certain reputation. That's why we go through a lot of training. And that's why selection picks a certain guy to do this. We can't all of a sudden say, well, no, we don't like this, we don't like that, this, that, and the other. Yes, you can turn around and say, maybe this mission is more difficult and we need this and we need more equipment and what have you. Yes, you can speak up and say what you want, but at the end of the day...
But when the chips are down, you've got to deliver.
At the end of the day, you've got to deliver. You've got to do as you're told. You've been given orders. And the three patrols were all up for this. We were told, almost an impossible task, really, when you think about it, Stefano, is that Saddam Hussein had invaded Kuwait, and the whole world had kind of, there were hundreds of thousands of troops in Saudi ready to cross over.
But you also had the added pressure of the Israelis threatening.
Correct.
To send they had 600 paratroopers on standby, and saying if the Scuds were landing on Tel Aviv, they were sending their guys
and
in.
That was happening. And Saddam, the leader of Iraq at that time, was very clever. He was sending these Soviet-made Scud rockets, mobile rockets, that he could fire from anywhere in the desert.
Right.
And there'd been quite a few land on Israel, Tel Aviv, and there'd been people killed. Right. So Israel had said, right, we're putting 600 paratroopers on standby, and they are going to parachute into Baghdad. Well, we all knew that if Israel gets into the war, there's going to be real problems. The whole Middle East is going to unite and fight against Israel. And our government said to Israel, look, if you get into the war, this is going to escalate. It's going to get bigger, and there's going to be more people killed. And they said, okay, we need updating. What are you going to do? And they said, we've got British troops that are going to be finding these Scud missiles and eliminate the threat. And that was our task.
And you were very successful, even though at the time, when you were behind the enemy lines and you were trying to relay intelligence back to HQ, as it were, you weren't getting a signal back to confirm receipt of that intelligence. So you were out there kind of sending the intelligence back, but because of the faulty equipment, you weren't sure if it was getting through. But subsequently, at the end, you learned that information did get through, and in fact, it proved to be really critical.
Yes,
mission, didn't it?
yeah, we're having problems with comms, and it's not like comms that I can speak into this and speak to you and you can listen to me. These are comms which are coded, sent in a certain procedure, and we wasn't sure that these comms were getting through because we wasn't getting any reply. So we were sending blind, if you like, hoping that they were getting through. And bear in mind, we'd got a task to do. So just to recap, if we got our Land Rovers that wasn't battle ready, and we hadn't got the right clothing, and we hadn't got the right mapping, and we haven't got the right information, intelligence, and now we haven't got the right radios, and we haven't got the right weapons and equipment. There's a lot of things going against us, but we've been ordered to carry out this task. So we are trying our best if we can. And by this, we sent blind, hoping that the information that we have gathered about the Scuds, that it was getting back to headquarters. Because the whole idea was to find these Scuds, or get the area where we thought they were, send back messages, then airstrikes would come in, eliminate the threat, okay, and we were hopefully sending these messages back. At first, we didn't think they were getting through. It was only until the end when we actually got back to our headquarters in Saudi Arabia that we realised that these messages were
get through.
Yes.
I mean, Des, during that period, and it's detailed extraordinarily well in the book, I have to say. I mean, it's captured the essence and the atmosphere of what was going on. Damien Lewis has done an incredible job.
He's great.
He's extraordinary of catching even the banter that goes on in these highly stressful situations. Yeah. The question I want to ask you is, was there any time, because apart from all the things you've mentioned, poor equipment, it was snowing, your supplies were running low, all that type of stuff. To compound matters, you were also being fired upon by the Allied fighter jets, the Americans, I think, didn't know that you were even there. So you've got all this going on. Was there any time that you thought, crikey, this curtain's up here? This is, what was the most scariest part of that whole episode? Was there a moment when you thought, oh my word, I don't think we're getting out of this one?
Yeah, there's quite a few, but I'll pick one, and it was right at the beginning when we had 2 helicopters and the Chinook helicopters. These are the helicopters which have the double blades on.
Right.
Okay. These things, are big, heavy lift helicopters. And we had all 3 patrols on the 2 helicopters.
Wow.
Okay, and we had our vehicles, 1 on each one.
Wow.
So the 3 patrols were split up between the 2.
Right.
Now we are flying from Saudi Arabia, okay, flying all the way across now Iraq, and we are flying at 50 foot off the ground. And these helicopters can fly at about 200 miles an hour. Okay, and the reason they fly so low is they call it nap-of-the-earth flying. It's so radar is difficult picking it up.
Right.
But what happened then, we hadn't been flying too long, and then all of a sudden, is that a Top Gun aircraft, an American aircraft, decided to interrogate us and put a lock on, and a lock on the aircraft is indicating that he's going to fire missiles at us.
Right.
And then the pilots of our aircraft was having to evade, and was being thrown all over the sky, and at one stage at 50 foot off the ground, I thought we were going to crash.
Wow.
And there were sparks coming out of the aircraft, and I'm thinking, are we getting fired? And I'm thinking, someone's firing at us from the ground. And I'm thinking, wow, they found us. I didn't know afterwards that it was a Top Gun aircraft. And the flashes that I'm seeing is that the aircraft that we're on, the Chinook helicopter, is sending out chaff and flares.
Right.
And because what it is, when you get a lock-on from an aircraft, the lock-on missile locks onto heat source.
Right.
The flares and the chaff that is being sent out is to confuse the missile that's coming in, so it doesn't impact the aircraft. And at one stage I'm thinking, here we are, three SAS patrols on Chinook helicopters, hundreds of miles behind enemy lines, traveling at 200 miles an hour or so, 50 foot off the ground. Nobody knows we're here, and yet we've got an American aircraft that now is going to shoot us out the sky.
Right.
But we are being sent hundreds of miles behind enemy lines to prevent World War III.
Right.
And yeah, it's laughable, and it was very scary at the time. And at that time we're thinking, World War III, don't be silly. But because of what's happening in the world at the moment,
Right.
the threat of a similar threat, agreed?
Right.
We thought the same at that time, don't we, Gaff? But we used to have a tongue-in-cheek with each other and say, I'll tell you what, there's hundreds of thousands of troops forming up on the border of Saudi Arabia ready to go into Iraq and Kuwait, and yet you've got 3 8-man patrols, Bravo 1, 2 and 3 on 2 ships. And we're going in to find a needle in a haystack to prevent World War III, and now we're going to get shot out of the sky by our own people. Nobody's going to know who we are. And we say, this is ridiculous, and we haven't got the right maps, the right equipment, the right vehicles, and we go, this is a mess, isn't it?
But thank God it didn't happen.
Yeah.
But I guess that's a classic example, maybe not, but you'll correct me otherwise.
Yeah.
But maybe is that an example of the fog of war? What could go wrong unintentionally?
Well,
I mean...
Do you know something? You talk about banter in the book, Stefano, don't you?
Because there is great banter with your team.
And, we got off the aircraft, and as soon as we landed and we got off the aircraft, straight away again, we're thinking, this is not what we were told. For example, we were told about that it was undulating ground, it was soft sand and what have you.
But it was as flat as a pancake, wasn't it? Yeah.
Like the moon landscape.
Yeah.
It was hard concrete. And all of a sudden we realised this is a bit cold as well.
Right.
This is not what we expected. But talking about the banter, Stefano, is that the banter is great. The banter is really Mickey taking into it. It's taking into it.
But
that's typical British humour, though.
But as a civilian, one would never think, actually, because you never see this in the movies.
No.
I mean, in the movies, what you see in these type of situations is all very, highly stressful, very macho.
Yeah.
What you don't see, which is what you read in the book, which makes it so, I think, so riveting and so real, is this, you guys basically take the piss out of each other when you're kind of facing death, which seems extraordinary, but as you say, you need it to lighten that psychological load.
Well, do you know what that is? When in the military, especially in the regiment, but across the British military, we're good at banter, aren't we? We like taking a piss out of each other, don't we? We do. And
you make it an art form.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
And it's the best humour, isn't it? But what it is, the guys are indicating that they're feeling a bit of tension. I can admit, I was scared, really scared. And when guys crack funnies, humour, take the piss out of each other, it's an indication that they're feeling it. They're a bit scared. So
it's your release valve, isn't it?
So we all kind of jump on board and we all nudge and banter and laugh and whatever. And it does release the tension. And it just makes, it's like a unity. It's like saying, well, we're all in on this, aren't we? We're all feeling it. We're all in it together. And it's just a way of saying, okay, let's just have a bit of a fun moment, let's, and it's just like saying, okay, guys, we're feeling it. Let's get on with the job in hand. Let's get it done. We've got a task to do. But it unifies us, doesn't it?
Right, I want to move on from the book. Before I do, I just want to ask one last question, because another thing which I read in the book, which I thought was extraordinary, and it's the last question about the book, and then I'd like to ask you just a few other things about life in the regiment. But the other thing that that you describe extremely well is what in the book is referred to as a hot debrief. And that's when you guys come off the mission at the end, you're back at HQ, and you've got all the senior guys in the regiment there, all of you are there who have participated in this particular mission. And it's the opportunity to kind of vent the things that went well and the things that didn't go well. I mean, this takes an appraisal to a different level altogether. I mean, there's nothing like this in civilian street that I've ever been aware of. But can you just explain why that process is so important? Because, I mean, it's admirable that you do it, and it's incredible that the leaders are actually submit themselves to have those types of questions posed at them by their troops. I mean, I thought that was actually really admirable.
And we do this all the time. We call it hot debrief. So we'll go away, there'll be a task, a mission. And when we come back, and we do it as early as we can. So we're still feeling the emotions. We're still feeling, and what we do is lessons learned. Right, what did we do wrong? What did we do right? Lessons learned. How can we make it better? And we might say that piece of equipment let us down. That tactic that we used didn't work too well. Okay, and maybe this time we can come in from that direction, or we might parachute in instead of coming in by boat, or we might come in by vehicle instead of coming over that mountain. So it's lessons learned. And this is what I think the regiment's very good at, is that we weren't too good at that this time, but let's make it better next time. Or we can say, we were really good there, so we know what to do next time. On this one that you're talking about, you can imagine there was a few things that needed to be said.
And you describe it really well. But can you explain how the CO responded, and also the chap from the signals, what he said, which I thought was incredible.
So what happened is you can imagine the whole regiment now at that time, so that's 3 squadrons, get together behind closed doors for a couple of days.
Right.
Okay.
So it's taken very seriously. It's not like half an hour before lunch and then...
It's just what I said, right, we're going to have 2 days, and it becomes a bit of a chest poking thing.
Right.
So what happens is each patrol stands up, said what they did, and then at the end of that, we kind of focus on what didn't work, and you can imagine guys will stand up and say, well, why, and it might be the CO, it might be whoever, and the intelligence officer, the signals officer at that time. So, for example, the signals officer, so why didn't the comms work, and why didn't this, and why didn't that, And you can imagine I don't think he gave the right answer. Right. So a lot of guys, and I think probably one of the things I want to say is that they said to the colonel, well, look, Colonel, and he's the boss. Right. He's the head of the regiment. Right. And
is he the ultimate? Yes, the capo di capi. He's the ultimate. Right. Okay.
He's the head. He's like the CEO.
Right. Okay.
He's the head of. He's the number one guy of. He's the boss.
Right.
He says what goes.
Right.
And I think at one stage there was 45, 47 guys missing at one stage at various times. That's a lot of guys. So one guy put his hand up and said, well, our patrol was in problems, and why didn't a helicopter come and get us at this particular time? Because there's certain procedures that are down in your orders. And one of them is said that if you have a certain problem, you are to go to a certain RV and a helicopter will come in and get you there. I'm broad brushing it now, okay? And he said, well, this didn't happen, did it, boss? Go on.
Is that how you refer to them?
Yeah, boss, yeah. Officers, okay. Sergeants, corporals, sergeant majors, we call them by their first names. Officers, it's called boss.
Okay.
And he said, yeah, I hear you. He says, we'd already got 40 odd guys on the run. I wasn't prepared to get another helicopter or a couple of helicopters, but another 20, 30 guys on with a possibility of losing those as well. And it was, but he said, hang on, that was down in our orders. He said, yes, it was, but I deemed it that, no, we wasn't going to lose any more men. And it comes to a stage where senior staff sergeant says, well, in that case, we're all SAS and we are big enough, tough enough and ugly enough to take the truth. If we are told something in orders, it needs to be carried out. If at the same time, it's not going to be carried out in the orders, well, then you must tell us, because if someone is not going to come and get us out of the shit, we know that we are going to get ourselves out of it. We're big enough to take that sort of straight talking, if you like. And the colonel said, yes, this is lessons learnt, and this is something that we may have to address in the future. After that, after about a couple of days, guys went downtown and did a bit of drinking and what have you, and then there was some more chest poking down there, and there's quite a few fracas. And the regiment's very good at letting the guys sort it out for at least a couple of weeks or so. And then after a couple of weeks, they go, stop, that is it. Okay, and no more is said. So everyone has had their said, everyone has done their chest poking, everyone has had an opinion, and if there's a few... as we say up in Sheffield, there's not much that a good smack in the teeth won't sort out.
I'm sure.
And if you get a smack in the teeth or you get a black eye, and Stefano, we're men's men, aren't we? We're in the military, British military. And, we're not nursery teachers, are we? And it's real life, agree?
But you've said really just how important something like that is, because it really is, I suppose, the military way of being almost cathartic, of getting everything off the chest.
Well, just underline everything, if you like. Let me just pick one incident. Cold weather clothing wasn't brought.
Yeah.
And you said earlier on that it snowed in Iraq. That was the first time, I think, for many years. It was the coldest winter they'd ever had on record. It snowed in the desert.
Which is unheard of.
Unheard of. And because of that, guys actually died in my regiment because of cold exposure. Okay, they died of cold elements, and really that's unforgivable, isn't it? So you can imagine there was a lot of heated exchanges. They did it grown-up wise. They did a lot of chest poking. There was a lot of saying what should be said. And that's the way I think the regiments are very good at doing that.
But you're saying all these lessons learned effectively, once I suppose all that angst is aired and
yes.
and the chests are beaten and all the rest of it, but then after that I suppose it's a learning process, isn't it? Because next time you say, well,
and once you've done it for a few weeks and there's a few black eyes and a few smacking of teeth and nobody said anything about it, there has to be a point when it stops. Agreed?
Yeah.
And the word goes about, so that's it, guys, enough
and
now,
time to move on.
Let's get on with it now. Let's unite, because there's other tasks coming up.
Okay.
There's other things to go for.
Des, I'd like to pick up on something else, because you very kindly came to our dojo in Temple Fortune earlier this afternoon, and you very graciously gave us a couple of hours of your time with our senior instructors and some of our black belt students. And one of the things that you were talking about, and you and I have discussed this many times, is that kind of the special forces mindset, if you like.
Yes.
And what is it that distinguishes, I suppose, a special forces soldier versus another ordinary soldier? And part of the reason why the guys found it so interesting listening to you is because you also have a passion for martial arts. So can you tell us a bit about your passion of martial arts, and then also just elaborate a little bit more on the kind of the mindset? Because if you don't mind me saying, Des, you are a svelte man. You're not a kind of 6'4" with brimming shoulders and muscles bulging everywhere. You're obviously in super shape, but even looking at the pictures in Bravo 30, you're a svelte guy. You're probably about 5'8", 5'9". So you're not the typical kind of Thor warrior that one would maybe anticipate being in a special forces unit. So clearly it's not necessarily the physicality, it's the mental attributes that distinguishes it. So can you talk a bit about martial arts and the mindset?
Yeah, just on that one, yeah. An SES guy, everybody visualizes the 6'5".
Yeah.
20,
like Jack Reacher.
Yeah. 6'5", 25 minutes across the chest.
Yeah.
A tin of rats of greasy one and a black whip in the other.
That's right.
But what you really got is a 5'8" Yorkshireman.
Right.
11 stone.
Right.
And it's a bit of a letdown, isn't it?
Right.
A few people have looked at me and gone,
really? Yeah.
That's like, but no, it is a funny side of it. So yeah, there's this expectation that people think about an SES guy.
Right.
And I think most guys are generally slim built. I think it's to do with the job we do,
Right.
It's a lot of endurance. Regarding martial arts, when I was a young guy growing up in Sheffield, there was a friend of mine invited me to go to martial arts, and straight away I took to it. In fact, we went to Bramall Lane football ground, and it was Shotokan karate.
Right.
And what I took to straight away is the Japanese approach to it. The Japanese are very, very disciplined, and what it really is, it's the samurai way of life, isn't it? And as you know, the samurais very fierce fighters, weren't they? But they were very articulate. They learned languages and they did calligraphy, and right down to their tea rituals. Yeah. And they would engage in conversation and about politics, and very, very intelligent. But the discipline is immense. I trained with a guy called Sensei Onoida, who was a 1966 old Japanese karate champion.
Wow.
And he was fierce.
Wow.
But his discipline was immense. So for me, I'd love the discipline, and I look towards the regiment as the modern day samurai, I feel like. I know it sounds a bit the way.
I mean, do you think that's...
Well, it's, for a start, I like to think that, let's face it, we get involved in a lot
of... You do.
We get involved in a lot of stuff, don't we? I think our discipline, and it's self-discipline, Stefano, it's a different sort of discipline. And I think it's the hardest discipline is self-discipline, And I like it that we're highly trained. And I like it that, we are articulate, we learn languages and skills and certain rituals and drills. So for me, the martial arts, that I really took to. And so when I joined the military, the paras, again, modern day warriors, if you're in any trouble, it's the paras you want to come and help you, you know what I mean?
Right.
And, they're not going to give any quarter, they're fierce warriors. But having life in the SES, yes, I would look towards them as the modern day samurai. So martial arts to me, I've always done. I've enjoyed it. Probably more because of the discipline, I think, if I was true.
So the discipline, the structure.
Yes. And even today, even in Surrey Street, My son's here today and he talks about how I'm still disciplined, have a morning routine, afternoon routine, evening routine. I suppose it's in that doctrination, isn't it?
Right.
And then you talked about the mindset, didn't you, of the regiment. And I think that mindset, again, has to do with a lot of discipline, doesn't it? I think if you can have strength of mind, discipline of the mind, that self-discipline, to be able to follow through. And I found that, you know, you can get the body very, very fit. You can get to its highest fitness. But there's times my body's let me down and it's my mind that's got me through, Stefano.
So can you elaborate a bit on that? I mean...
well, let's talk about the Bravo 3-0.
Right.
I mean, we were all going down with exposure, you know, and exposure is an awful thing because it's the mind that goes first. Okay, the mind goes foggy. So if the mind's going foggy, you can't
make decisions,
So we are taught to recognise that within each other. So, you know, if it's cold and I'm watching Stefano and he's doing silly things, guess what? He's probably going down with cold. And you see Des doing, you know, that's not Des, you know. So what we realised is that we had to make decisions early because we knew that we were going down with cold exposure. So it's that strength of mind again, and I've found that out many, many times, is that you can get the body as strong as you think you've got it, but there's times it will let you down. And then it's a mind thing. The SEALs, we talked about SEALs earlier on. The SEALs talk about this 20%. And they were saying when you are spent, when you've got nothing less physically, you've always got 20% left. Okay.
But that 20% you're saying is hidden in the box in your head.
It's hidden in your mind, in your body.
Right.
And let's face it, your body is mechanical.
Right.
It's the mind that makes the body do things, agreed? It's the strength over your mind, that strength then that tells your body you must do this.
Okay, so the next question then is it nature nurture? I mean, is that something you can learn? That kind of that stoic tenacity. Can you learn that, or either you've got it or you don't have it? Because you clearly are one of 3% out of 4%, whatever it is, out of 250, 260 guys who got through. And by your own admission, there were guys who were bigger, fitter, leaner, better soldiers and the rest of it. But you got through. So why did Des Powell get through?
Okay, it's said, arguably, okay, we had a selection process for the regiment, which goes back from the 50s. And they're saying that if you get a certain individual and you put them under heavy mental stress, heavy physical stress, and heavy sleep stress or sleep deprivation, those three stresses, the real you will come out over 6 months.
Right.
The real you.
Right.
Arguably, what they're saying is, okay, is the real you hidden within everyone? So everyone that's put under those mental stress, physical stress, sleep deprivation stress, is the real you come out? Okay, or is it learnt? Is it taught? Okay. And what they're saying is, arguably, they're saying it's already in us. Okay, I've had some, the psychology, I've had doctors look at me and other guys as well, and they've done tests on us and whatever, and they were saying that a special forces guy has already got it in him. And I'm saying this arguably, okay, because some people say, no, it isn't and whatever. So, yes, in the regiment, the selection process selects a certain type of individual because in the SAS you are going to be put in certain difficult situations, but that doesn't matter because we need to get the task, the mission done. So we need certain people to carry out that task, and the selection process will choose that. Then when we get that certain individual, then we teach them certain skills. Does this sound like the samurai?
Yeah.
Yes, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
You know, and not just that, but the cultures around the world. There's certain cultures that I've come across that do that. They'll select a certain person and then they'll teach them skills. And I think there's certain things that you can look in history and I think us as a nation, when we look at us of what we are, we come from the Northern Hemisphere, we come from an island, you know, and we have a certain mindset. Would you agree?
Yeah.
And look at us when we was an empire, and you've got that, mate. We're up for a fight, aren't we? And I will tell you that we have the best British forces in the world. Okay, I'm not saying there's not good forces out there from other countries. There is, but I could tell you that some of them countries always say, is UK getting involved in this conflict?
Right.
And they say, yeah. And they go, thank goodness. You know what I mean? And we're always asked to teach and train around the world. We're always asking
that's
about
happened recently, hasn't it?
And you're asking about this stoic mindset. So hopefully I've answered where you get a certain individual that is trained in a certain way, a selection process, let's say, and then you teach them certain skills. Okay, I think then this certain individual comes about with a stoic mindset.
And they will flourish, clearly, which is what happened to you.
And let's face it, as I said earlier on, you join the SAS, there should be no surprises. You're going to be pretty stressed. You're going to be put under difficult situations. You're going to take on tough tasks, tough missions, okay? And so therefore, the preparation of selecting you first, and then the preparation of new tasks. And it's, for me, when I was in the regiment, I loved this. I thrived on it. And not just me, but my friends as well. As I said earlier, all them 6 guys that come through, all of us, we've all had long careers. And I think what I'm saying is the selection process works. And I think the lifestyle that we led works as well, because that lifestyle within the regiment is preparing us all the time for tasks coming up. We live a very pragmatic lifestyle.
Right, Des, I've got penultimate question for you.
Yes.
Penultimate question, because it's fascinating listening to you speak
on
on this. Honestly, it's really, really interesting. Penultimate question. What's the most, I think I know what it is, obviously, but what's the most asked question you're ever asked when people know that you've had a Special Forces background? I'd imagine there's one question that every little kid must ask you.
Okay, and you know what it is.
I'm assuming it's, have you ever killed anyone or something along those lines?
Yes, I get asked this regular, and I know why it's asked.
Right.
Me and Billy Billingham talk about this, when I was with Billy, a few nights ago.
Right.
And Billy said, something I get asked this question all the time, doesn't it?
It must get almost tedious.
I goes, right. I says, it started to be asked to me, and he says, Des, and I took Billy's steer on this.
Right.
He said, you know what I said, Des? He says, what you're really asking is how many lives had me and the regiment saved. He says, that's what you're asking.
That's great.
Yeah, and that's what I said. And really, that I understand why it's asked, Stefano. Right. And the regiment has a certain reputation, doesn't it, of getting the job done. It
does. Worldwide.
Yeah, but you know something? I think what people would really be surprised about, Stefano, is that the regiment is a great lover of life. They have a great respect for life. Right. And we will do our very best not to get into conflict. There's times when they've asked us to go into a place and what have you, and we've gone there and we've observed it and we've come out and said, no, you need to do this, you need to police it, you need to do A, B, C, D, and E. We understand that when there is a task that needs to be done, which is imminent and it's dangerous, well, then we have to go there and we have to get the job.
I mean, I guess you are the ultimate thinking man soldier, aren't you? Because it's not just the brawn, it's the brains with it, isn't it? It's the high level or the high mix of both, isn't it?
Yeah, agreed. And I hear people, the psychologists talk about, the blunt instruments and what have you, is that, yes, there's an intelligence there and they want that. They want a walking, talking, thinking, intelligent soldier. Some of the tasks I can imagine. It's very complex, isn't it?
Right, I'm conscious of time.
Yes.
Because our time's coming to an end.
Yes.
I'd just like you to end, Des, because you've come up with some extraordinary sayings.
Yes.
But what couple of sayings would you say sort of embody the spirit of the regiment the best?
Yeah, the words to me are kind of tangible. They stir you, don't they? Right. I like listening to Churchill saying and Orwell, and there's some funny sayings as well that we have in the regiment. It's like, in the SAS, one of my friends once said to me, he says, Des, he says, just be aware, you're coming up to the regiment. He says, in our profession, becoming dead is very, very easy. Right. It's staying alive, which is the hardest part. And that was said to me very early on. I'm thinking, that sounded a bit dramatic. And I'm thinking, has that just been said to me? And I'm going,
the truth is often said in jest. Yeah.
And then there was this one by Orwell I like, and it goes like this. It goes, women and children sleep safely in their beds at night because rugged men are willing to do violence on their behalf.
Wow. Okay.
And I know that word, some people say, use violence there. Well, I'll tell you something, on modern day, why don't you say rugged men are willing to do work on their behalf and what have you? But I think it's what we talked about earlier. There's times when you've got to get the job done.
Right.
And I like to think that, there's some things that some people do that are unacceptable. And isn't it good that I think there's a regiment that are willing to that care about life that much, that are willing to do something about it. But there's one that I really like, and I work with some special forces in South Africa.
Right.
And I was talking to this guy one day, and we were having a banter like this. And I said, you know, our motto is who dares wins. Right. And by the way, when I did a thing with the Italians some years ago, and I worked with those great bunch of guys, but I used to joke with them. I said, you have a motto that, you know, who cares who wins, you know. And I know you're Italian, aren't you? So that's why I've got to say it, you know. So, but these guys, Italians, by the way, they're a great bunch of guys, great banter, and we did some great work with them out in Rome. And they were very good to us. But that sort of banter again. Right. But there's one on the South African. I'll get back to that one, and I talked about, you know, who dares wins, and he said to me, you know, there's a saying that we have, and it goes like this. He says, "You haven't lived until you've almost died. And for those that fight for it, life has a flavour, all of its own, that the weak and timid shall never know."
Des, on that note, thank you so much indeed for coming to do our podcast. Thanks for coming to see us in the dojo, and hopefully we'll get you back down again soon. But thank you very much.
Stefano, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right, God bless you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.